Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series and beyond. I am your host, Constant Reader Scott Daly, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Matt Freeman, an 80-foot suit of armor.
Fee, fi, fo, fum.
I'm going to shove a guitar pick in your not face.
Oh no. Defeated so easily.
This week on the show, we continue our coverage of Stephen King and Peter Straub's The Talisman with chapter 37, that's last week, chapter 41 through 44 of the book. Our characters enter the Black Hotel, retrieve the talisman, and rejoice. But the end is not quite here yet.
That's right. It's not quite. It feels like the climax. It feels like we're done. We even got a little bit of emotional resolution, except it's not quite done yet because the chapter ends with Sloat running off to
do some
probably just kill everyone.
Yeah,
that's kill all of our heroes.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's but yeah, it was great. It was super awesome. Can't wait to talk about it.
So what were your overall thoughts? I mean, like I think it is the climax, but it's not the climax. You're right. So, but as a climax, what did you think?
Very intense. I found that like I had to slow down because like things were happening so fast. I had to slow down and like go into a like dark room and lie down and listen to the reading instead of like, because I often do other things while I'm reading, and I don't particularly feel that it impacts my absorption of the words, but when it's this intense and fast and like complicated, I do, have to make myself pay full attention to it, which I did this week. Good.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. Oddly enough, I did not remember a lot of this week's reading going into it. Going into this book, the big thing I remembered was Jack goes into the hotel, it turns into a castle, and he fights a bunch of knights, and then he gets the talisman. I did not remember a lot of the specifics of it, and I was kind of blown away by how much I enjoyed it on this week's this reread. There's just so much good stuff, good character work going on here, and some stuff that really I think vindicates might be the wrong word, but like feels right to me in the lanes that we've been talking about throughout the entire book so far. Like it feels like, oh yes, this is what the book was doing, and here's it kind of confirming it for us here in the climax. I felt that way a lot while reading this. It's like, oh yes, of course this is what Jack is experiencing in this moment. Oh yes, of course this is what's happening. I felt a lot of that.
Yeah, definitely seemed to button up a lot of the themes that we've been tracing. Another thing that I noticed was like, man, is this a Dark Tower book? And we're going to talk about the specifics as we get through, but like there's so much in here where I was like, holy crap, like we've noticed little, Dark Tower references and references to the White here and there in other books, but this is just like the most overt, direct, like I was somewhat shocked by how much there was.
Yeah, I think when people talk about this book as being Dark Tower adjacent, and they say things like, there's a lot of Dark Tower-esque stuff going on here, I think they're not remembering correctly just how much there is, because you were absolutely right that there's moments in this where you're just like, where I'm just like, I kind of put down the book and just be like, oh, this is just the Dark Tower.
Yeah,
like just beat for beat. Theme for theme, tone for tone. It's just exactly that.
The same exact words. It's the White. It's we'll get there. We'll talk about it in detail.
Yeah. All right. Before we get into the reading, though, we did have a couple of quick announcements. The first is, as you are listening to this, a new episode of Other Levels of the Tower, which is our Patreon exclusive podcast that we release once a month, where we look at adaptations of Stephen King's novels and short stories and everything. A new episode of that has been released. It came out yesterday. If you're listening to this today, it came out. And this month we decided to cover the film A Good Marriage, which is an adaptation of Stephen King's short story of the same name that came out in the Full Dark, No Stars short story collection. I think that was a decade ago. It's one of the more recent ones. Matt, I really loved this conversation. We recorded that episode last night, and I was very, very happy with everything that we talked about. So it's whether or not you've seen the movie A Good Marriage and whether or not you liked the movie, I think the conversation itself is worth listening to in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I agree. It was just briefly to tip our hand what we talk about, like, it's not a bad movie. Neither is it a great movie that I would say, oh, you have to go run out and watch it. But there was a lot to talk about. There was a lot of interesting character stuff going on, and it was well performed too. And that so there was really a lot for us to chew on. And for a movie that I had never heard of and did not expect to enjoy, I had a good time with it, and I had a really good time talking about it with you.
Yeah. So if you want to listen to that, you can head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia, pledge at the $10 level or higher, and you get access to that episode. Plus, I think we've been doing this for over a year now. I'm not sure exactly how many there are, at least 14 episodes of this show where we look at other stuff. So if you listen to that episode and like it and want to check out all the other ones, you have access to all of those as well, and a bunch of other bonus stuff that we do over on our Patreon. Bonus stuff that you and I create, bonus stuff that you do with your brother, bonus stuff that some of the other members of our network do as well. Just a plethora of bonus content there for you.
That's right.
Speaking of content, Matt, we also have something else we're doing on our other podcast, aren't we?
We have started up a new thing. That's right.
What is this new thing?
We have started up our Deconstructing Ridley Scott series. So, we've done many iterations of this Deconstructing Directors show where we pick one director, we watch all of their films in order, and we talk about them week by week. And I feel like it's been, I've certainly learned a lot in doing that. And the next one that we've chosen is Ridley Scott. So we've done the first episode on Ridley Scott's first film, The Duelists. And this week that you're listening to this episode, the second film will come out, which is Ridley Scott's Alien, which is, of course, his breakout film that everyone knows him for.
Maybe you've heard of it.
Maybe you've heard of it.
Yeah, I love these episodes. If you've never tried out our other podcast, The Doofcast, which is mostly a movie and TV kind of variety show type talk stuff, if you like our conversations, it's very similar, just about different things. So you should check that out. And I do think the Deconstructing series is one of the things that I'm most proud of that we do. I feel like it's just kind of people getting to listen in as we learn about both directors and about filmmaking. And it's very, very fun. I really enjoyed Ridley Scott's first movie, and I can't wait to talk to you about Alien as well. We haven't recorded that episode yet, but by the time, not by the time you're hearing this, but very soon, you'll be listening to that, hopefully.
That's right.
And then the 24 other movies that Sir Ridley Scott has directed as well in the weeks to come. It
is going to be a long haul. Yes.
26 doesn't sound like a lot until you realize that's a number of weeks. And then you're like, wow, that's half a year. What have we done? But we're not here to talk about Ridley Scott. We are here to talk about... I was trying to think of a play on words on that and nothing came into mind. We're here to talk about the Talisman and the boy that is about to collect it. So we begin this week's reading, Matt, with an interlude. We talked about this last week, but before Jack sets foot in the hotel, we cut over once again to our villain, Morgan Sloat. This is the final interlude of the book, titled Sloat in This World 5. And we see very quickly that this is Sloat in the moments following Jack and Richard's entrance into the hotel. Morgan is he's a fascinating character, Matt, and here I think we start off with him recognizing that things are almost over, right? He is, as with all Stephen King characters, they always have like some level of knowledge that they're in a story and that they're recognizing that the story is coming to its conclusion. And I love the wording here when it says it's not coming to a head, but coming together. Everything is coming together, which is a great term. It has many, many meanings in the story as we're watching these two worlds kind of collide together. We're watching characters and their twinners kind of collide together. It's very, very fitting. And I really loved it. It's a great strong start for this interlude.
Yeah, it keys us in on sort of what we're in for, what we should be prepared for, and a lot of the really awesome kind of imagery and writing that we're about to see.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And then we have to think back to what Richard Sloat was saying last week about his father, the statement, "My father is dead." We'll learn a little bit later this week, a little bit further into the chapters, that what he means when he said that is exactly what you predicted last week, Matt, that whatever was Morgan Sloat is in a large sense gone and has been replaced by his twinner. But that's not exactly true, right? It's not as if Morgan Sloat has ceased to exist, because we see him here. We see Morgan Sloat acknowledging the fact that his son is most likely dead, and I think on some level taking responsibility for it. Like, I think there's this really interesting part where he begins blaming Jack for that. He's like, "My son is dead. My son is definitely dead by now. And it's all that boy's fault. It's all Jack Sawyer's fault." And then like a little nagging voice in the back of his head says, "And yours, Morgan, yours as well." And so Morgan Sloat is not entirely gone, right?
Yeah, I mean, my take is more that he's not been so much replaced by his twinner as he has been replaced by the amalgam of himself and his twinner, which is now like sort of a new being, who may in fact be worse than either man would have been alone. It's interesting because, you know, we see similar things happening with Jack, but it's different. I think it's different because I think it has to do with the idea that Jack is this single-natured being, where even though we kind of see him flipping and sort of turning into Jason at times, it's like, well, he and Jason fundamentally are the same in a way that the two Morgans are not. And I think I don't know. I think this is kind of what's ruining Morgan.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, and I think that's something I want to spend some time on, and I'm not sure exactly how to approach it, because we do see that Jack and Jason are kind of combined. I mean, the book textually says those two people are combining to form a third entity, right? That is not Jason, not Jack, but a combination of both of those people. And I think it's reasonable to assume that is happening to everyone else around here as well. Yeah. But to your point, Jack is unique. Jason is not a living person that exists in this world. He is a soul, a spirit, a memory of a dead person, a memory of a dead person that importantly, like, never truly existed, right? Because like there was not a adolescent Jason, there was not a young adult Jason, right? Like, he died as a baby. Yeah. So like it's just an idea of a person, a soul of a person, and so that is unique and different from what is happening to everyone else.
I just figured out, partly because of what you just said. You just said spirit, Jason, Jack, etc. It's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. It's the Trinity. So
is where does God fall into that? Where does the Father fall into that?
I'm not sure who is who. I'm not. I kind of want to say that Jack is the Son, and I kind of want to say that Jason is the Holy Spirit.
Sure.
Which kind of only leaves the Father, and the Father would then have to be, by process of elimination, the amalgam of the two entities into this sort of greater being. I know. I feel like I'm reaching there.
Yes and no. I mean, I think, you know, I'm kind of spoiling our later conversations, but this idea that like Jack getting the talisman can be seen as a Christ ascending, you know, being reborn and ascending type move, right? In which case, becoming God is kind of the whole point of this whole thing, except we will see that it isn't, and that's a very interesting kind of wrinkle on this whole metaphor we've been talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. I definitely I was struggling with the idea that there's a contradiction here, and I was like, well, everybody's favorite contradiction is the Trinity, because it's like, it's sort of a logical impossibility that is portrayed as like, well, it's a mystery. You're not meant to fully understand it.
Sure. No, I like that. But speaking of the Bible, we have another Bible quote going on here in the book, Matt, because in this moment where Morgan Sloat is wrestling with his the death of his son, he hears his own father speak to him saying, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world if he should lose his own son?" This, folks, is another quote directly from the Bible, only it is slightly changed here. The line in the Bible is, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world if he should lose his own soul?" Not son. But I mean, honestly, like, same diff, right? Like, if you sacrifice your son for the world, have you not sold your soul in some way? I think the answer to that is yes.
Yeah, I love a good tactical misquote that ends up being better than the original.
Yeah. It's great. It's a great reference, and I love Morgan's reaction to it, right? He's kind of sitting here processing it, and then what he says is, "It profits a man the world," Morgan shouted in the decaying room. He began to laugh and pace again. "It profits the man the world, and by Jason, the world is enough." Of course, Morgan, everyone knows that the world is not enough. Pierce Brosnan taught us that in the 90s, so
come on.
I don't know why you're trying with this whole thing.
Well, I guess that's the tragedy of him, doing all of this prior to the 90s.
That's the Denise Richards one, right? The world is not enough. I think it is.
A younger me would have known the answer to that off the top of his head, but I don't remember.
I think my complete disinterest in Bond as a franchise is entirely to do with the fact that I grew up during the Pierce Brosnan era.
Totally.
Like, this is all bad movies. GoldenEye was important, but only because of the video game, and I don't think I ever really enjoyed GoldenEye the movie.
I definitely saw all of those Pierce Brosnan
I did too.
movies,
I definitely saw them all. They're not good.
No, they're not.
So I do want to say here, to get back on topic, I don't know if this is intentional, but I do appreciate kind of the central irony here of Morgan kind of saying, wrestling with the idea that he's just sacrificed his son for what he wants, and then justifying it in a way by saying, well, no, because what I'm getting is the world, and that's everything. That's what I want. And he's saying all this while sitting in an abandoned, disgusting, rotting hotel with quote, vintage mouse turds turning to powder in the dark spaces behind the walls. Like, this idea that the world he's so eagerly and desperately trying to rule sucks actually. And like, it's just the perfect place to put this entire internal argument that's happening within Morgan, is this rotting, terrible, awful hotel.
While he's trying to convince himself that he's done the right thing. It's a classic sort of villain here who has completely lost sight of what actually makes a person happy and what makes life worth living, and mistakenly thinks that he'll just be totally cool with having sacrificed his son for some cartloads of Kingsland ale or whatever. It is a classic sort of villainy where it's like, what do you even want anymore? You're just greedy. I don't know.
You're absolutely right, because one of the things we learn right after this moment is that what Sloat wants is to smash the talisman, not take it up and lift it into his hand, but destroy it. He says here, it's not a key, it's a door. And like the Dark Tower that it obviously represents, if it is destroyed, all worlds would kind of collapse in on each other, right? And so Morgan's plan here is to smash that, have like a singularity moment where all worlds crash into one, and then somehow rule them. Which, like, how he plans to do that is really nebulous, and you're just like, wait, what? I think this, by the way, I'm not like critiquing this move by the authors. I think this is very intentional. His grand evil plan doesn't make any fucking sense. And I think this is very common in these kind of grand evil villains and these archetypal villains in these stories. The type of villain that wants to destroy the world, when you're like, but hey, but that you'll be dead too. That doesn't make any sense. Why would you want to do that? And I think it absolutely fits in the line of these kind of villains where he's gone so far down this path that now he's just like, yes, no, actually, I'm going to destroy the world so that I could rule it. And how are you going to do that? Like, it's one thing to say, if I get hold of the talisman, I will have all the power of the world, and I can use the most powerful object in the world to bring it under my whim. But no, he specifically says here he wants to smash it. And so then what, Morgan?
Right. It's unclear what he imagines will happen. Like I think that he just kind of wants to be God.
Yeah.
And imagines that will be what happens if he were to smash it, is he'll be, all powerful.
Yeah, it's the underpants gnome situation. It's step 1, smash talisman. Step 2, question mark. Step 3, am God.
Yeah. That's how most of my plans go, by the way. Yeah. Well, like one thing I kept thinking about with respect to Sloat is that Sloat is like a cocaine habit in human form. Like it's no surprise at all to find him actually doing cocaine in the book. If anything, it's a bit too on the nose, if you'll pardon the pun. Because
I just got that. Jesus Christ.
Because like his whole relationship with the territories is the behavior of an addict who's dependent on the high and on the sensation, on the intensity of everything. And, it's the kind of megalomania and wanting to be God that we hear him kind of spouting in his internal monologue here. It's really perfectly normal for a coke fiend, which is what he is.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. I think that's spot on. And it makes me appreciate the addiction and the drugs as a more central metaphor than I had thought of it. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, like in retrospect, the fact that he's doing coke is like, that makes that's who this character is. Perfect.
So we see here also that Sunlight Gardener / Osmond is also freaking out in this moment. He says, I think they've gone inside where it is. We tried to shoot them, but the deep creatures rose up and protected them, just as the Book of Good Forming said they would. And if they're inside, Gardner's voice was rising. Osmond's eyes rolled with mingled hate and dismay. So there's 2 things I love about this whole thing, Matt. The first is I love that there has been this ongoing prophecy about Jason / Jack throughout the entire book, but we're only ever made aware of it in the most vague possible sense. Like we have characters saying, it's like the prophecy or vaguely reference it. Here's like really the first solid bit that somewhere in the prophecy it said, and then Jack would go into the hotel and the evildoers would try to stop him, but the deep creatures would rise up and protect him. You're just like, what the fuck? But like, I love this. I love that there's never a moment where like Jack sits down and reads the prophecy, or someone like talks to him and explains the detail of the prophecy about him to himself. Like we understand that the things happening here are part of something bigger than just our characters. We get that. The book has shown that to us. We don't need the details of this prophecy to understand that. And I think this is what kind of saves the book from doing this thing where when you have fate and prophecy and determinism, it makes it feel like characters' agency is being robbed, because, we've all taken this away from this is the way it was always going to happen. And therefore it doesn't matter what your choices are. And in fact, I think, as we'll talk about in a few minutes, it is almost the exact opposite of that in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I know what you're referring to, and it does. It kind of reminds me of the bit where they hand Roland the copy of Insomnia, and he decides not to read it because it's a trap. Like I think it is a little bit of a trap to be given your own prophecy.
Yeah,
but it actually limits you for the same reasons that I eventually kind of hypothesized that Roland refused to read the book. Like it limits you from being able to actually execute your fate because now you're doing it for the wrong reasons. So
yeah, I like that. Yeah. The other thing I love about this passage is the idea that we see here in this moment that Gardner's voice was rising, but it's Osmond's eyes that rolled with a mingled hate and dismay. So this idea that like they are becoming one in a lot of ways, and yet there are still unique individual aspects of them that are being displayed kind of simultaneously. I think it's just really fun. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and you can imagine them like from moment to moment, parts of them swapping around and stuff. Yeah, because I do, although they are twinners, I do imagine them looking and behaving more than a little bit differently. So it's very fun to kind of imagine that there's this new being that's kind of shifting and shimmering between being Osmond and Gardner.
Yeah, no, totally. So the end of the interlude happens when Sloat decides that when Jack does come out of the hotel with the talisman, which he assumes he will get at this point, he will come out by the beach the way he went in, and that is where they will take it from him. So he grabs Gardner/Osmond and they head down to the beach, and that is the end of our interlude chapter. So back with Jack now, Matt. Mm-hmm. We move into chapter 41, The Black House. I think it's the Black Hotel. I got a little ahead of myself here, Matt, because the Black House is the name of the next book we're covering.
Later.
Yeah. The Black Hotel. We're back with Jack. The talisman we see is still desperately calling out to him. And we get this moment, and I want to talk to you about this for a bit, Matt, because Jack climbs up and looks out at the veranda and describes it in this way. He was on a wide deck like an elevated veranda he saw. Once, fashionable in the 20s and 30s, folk had sat out here at the cocktail hour under the shade of umbrellas, drinking gin rickeys and sidecars, perhaps reading the latest Edgar Wallace or Ellery Queen novel, perhaps only looking out to where Los Cavernas Island could be dimly glimpsed, a blue-gray whale's hump dreaming on the horizon, the men in whites, the women in pastels. So, this paragraph, Matt, is it Jack thinking these things? Does Jack have a lot of knowledge of the styles of the 20s and Edgar Wallace and Ellery Queen novels from the 20s and 30s?
Scott, all Stephen King characters know all books that have ever existed. It's just something that we know at this point.
To be clear, I'm being a little cheeky here. I do adore this. I do adore that every single Stephen King character is like the most literary knowledgeable person in the world, even an 11-year-old boy. Like it's fabulous. I love it so much.
Yeah. You know what I also can't find on a map is any island called Las Cavernas Island.
Oh, you looked it up? Yeah. I don't know what that's. It could be a reference that we're completely missing here, because obviously Jack at 11 years young is so much more well-read than you or I will ever be.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I'm sure that's a direct reference to some thing about a hotel and nights and something that's super appropriate.
Sure. The other detail I love here is the way Jack describes the color of the Black Hotel, reminding him of the color he worries his mother's lungs currently are. And I think it really serves us to, as we go into this final climactic scene, to just remind the reader what's at stake here. It's like a lot of shit has happened over the last 500 pages, but don't forget he's here for his mom.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important to recenter the stakes there. Yeah.
I also love the detail that the hotel has written on the windows and doors in soap, right? The windows are soaped over and messages are written in that white soap. And I love this specifically because we've been told that nobody can enter this hotel, right? Like there are two people in the whole universe that can enter this hotel, and those people are Jack and Richard. So no human being crawled out onto the hotel's veranda and soaped out a message to threaten Jack. This is just the hotel itself fucking with him in a very specific kind of way. And I love it.
Yeah, we're rapidly made to realize that the hotel can do whatever the hell it wants, basically. Yeah. Although it's fun because so the first bit here is sort of showing us oh no, he's in big trouble because this hotel is super magical. Mm-hmm. But as we're gonna see gradually, it's actually all bark and no bite. So it's very scary at first because you're like, oh my god, what has he gotten himself into? Yeah. And then of course you realize oh, it can't really do much to him actually.
Yeah, I mean it doesn't at all. Mm-hmm. Arguably, we'll talk about that in a minute, but mm-hmm. It doesn't seem to.
Yeah.
So the Black Hotel itself has a series of tests for young Jack. And the first one is basically the movie Home Alone, where he looks at the door leading from the veranda into the hotel, and the handle is red hot as if it's been heated up to a glowing near molten level. And Jack has to grab it and open the door. As you said, we learned that this is just an illusion, right? That it was never hot. It was just the hotel fucking with him. But I think the interesting thing here is exactly how this happens, because Jack is immediately challenged by the hotel to say I don't think you're quote unquote Jason enough for this, right? Mm-hmm. But in the end, Jack beats the challenge not because of his Jason-ness, but because of his Jackness, because his mother's voice comes in and says to him, Has something or someone always got to push you, Jacko? Come on, big guy. You set this going by yourself. You can keep it going if you really want to. Has that other guy got to do everything for you? I love this. I love that we bring it back to that. It as you talked about before, Jack is not becoming Jason, right? This is not a transfer into Jason. This is a combining of two souls into something else, and the Jack part of that is key to it still.
Yeah, I mean, you could even say that he's really just discovering who he's always been, or creating himself maybe, or discovering himself, or there's a bunch of different ways you could phrase it, but it's the person who has undergone all of the growth in this journey is, of course, Jack. It's not like the only sense in which he became Jason was that Jason is the name of the thing that he is transforming into, but it's always been him. And you could view it as like the hotel is trying to psych him out by saying like, you're not this religious figure. You're just a boy. You can't possibly win here. And in reality, it's like, no, like that's bullshit designed to sabotage you. You are exactly what is needed here. Just you, Jack, just you.
Yeah. Let me try to put a new spin on this. If Jason is the resurrected Christ, then Jack is Christ pre-resurrection, right? And it's very important to this whole process that Jack do these things and make these choices, right? It is like that matters. It mattered that Jesus went knowingly to his death, right? And it matters that Jack knowingly moves into this whole thing. So it is not his essential Jasonness is not important to this moment. It is the most human side of him that is the most important in this moment. This is, by the way, completely tangentially why I've always kind of really just loved the Jesus story, because just the idea of he was just a dude and he didn't know, he believed this thing would happen. He believed it with all his heart. He didn't know for sure, right? And I love that. I love that idea. And that's what, like, not to from a storytelling perspective, I don't want to offend anyone. From a storyteller perspective, pre-resurrection Jesus is way more interesting to me than post-resurrection Jesus, because he's just a dude.
Yeah.
And that's why I love Jack here as well. And why I love that he doesn't really ever become the full Jason side, because he's so much more interesting as the strong in belief but uncertain Jack.
Yeah, I mean, Jason is fundamentally kind of an unrelatable figure. He's this magical prince from Narnia.
Yeah,
and he's dead on top of that. Whereas Jack is this kid who we've watched him struggle through the muck and the sort of the most undignified and just kind of horrible parts of our real world, and so he's just super relatable and super human. I totally get what you're saying here. I agree.
So Jack drags Richard into the hotel as a force pushes back against him, trying to keep him out, but he pushes through that force. And here, I think, is one of the most important things that the book is saying. And I think this is kind of going to be one of the big things our conversation talks about for maybe the rest of the night. There's this phrase as Jack pushes through the force. It says, he had entered a strange dancing ritual whose conclusion he felt was not at all preordained. He was on his own. So I want to take this and I want to contrast this with Morgan from the interlude we just read, and also a Morgan we will go back to later in this week's reading. A person that is absolutely convinced that all of this is preordained, that all of this is going to happen exactly this way, and all he has to do is sit back and wait for it, and everything will fall into his lap because this is the way it was always going to go. I think this is really important here, because the prophecy doesn't matter. I mean, that's what the text is saying here, that perhaps there was a prophecy that led up to Jack walked into the hotel, but everything from here on out is all up to Jack, is all up to his personal decisions. The choices he makes in these moments are not prophesized, are not deterministic, are just his. Yeah,
I think that feels right to me. I mean, what it most reminds me of is this dichotomy of the purpose versus the random, where maybe the prophecy and so forth could be said to be part of the purpose, but that the random, in the Stephen King cosmology specifically, at least, the random always gets to mess into things. It always gets to, the purpose maybe dictates which cards are going to come out, but the random can change the order or something. Sure. I don't know. And it can really, there's obviously bad outcomes in these stories sometimes. So yeah, I agree with you. It feels right.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, this concept of Ka exists in this world. It is a world in which determinism seems to run rampant. But I also think it's a world in which people's individual choices always, always, always seem to matter anyway. And I think it's interesting things like this where there does exist this overwhelming force that is in this world, but it is almost entirely beholden to what choice an individual makes at what moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that.
And I think it is important that the villains of the story are the ones that are so obsessed with the determinism, that they are the ones that are, comforted by the idea that everything is supposed to happen this way.
Yeah, it's interesting because it seems like King's villains are often more of the random, but that these guys are more like, yes, we want order, we want control, we want everything to be predictable, and we want to be in control of it.
Yeah,
which is
yeah. You're right. I mean, those, I think, the two opposing forces of the novel in what the territories represents and what our world represents, also contrasted in the idea of magic and the idea of rationality, the ideas of Jack and the ideas of Richard as kind of avatars of these two forces. That it seems like Jack is much more in the camp of the irrational, the random in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I like that. Actually, I'm only now starting to think about that. So maybe I'll have something interesting to say about it next week. But yeah, Matt, that's pretty interesting.
This is why we have an overview episode at the end of these books.
Yeah, there you go.
So Jack drags Richard a little further into the hotel where they are taunted by a spider calling them fushing fiefs, which is hilarious. At this point, Richard has collapsed, and Jack knows that he can't drag him towards the next challenges he has to face, so he leaves him here. But he's worried about his safety, so he leaves him with a talisman of his own. He leaves him with the marble that he was given by the salesman in the territories that is a mirror over there. He doesn't actually know what it does or how it works, but we get this line here, quote, "It came from the territories, and, blasted lands aside, the territories were innately good. And innate goodness, Jack reasoned, must have its own power over evil." So do you agree with the sentiment that territories are on their own innately good?
Not really, no. We've seen a lot of horrible stuff in the territories. Now, you could argue that this has all been a kind of evil imposition upon the territories by outside forces. But then, I don't know, man, do I get to say that I am innately good, but yes, anytime I do something bad, it's not really my nature, it's your fault, Scott. It seems squirrely, right? So but on the other hand, though, it's a pretty common line of logic in metaphysics and in theology to say God is innately good, for example. Even though evil is rife throughout the world, we say God is innately good, and we place the evil in a different box. So maybe Jack is correct here, and the territories are actually innately good. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously we've seen a lot of terrible things in the territories. There's killer trees. There's awful people. I think it is fair to say that also saying blasted lands aside is a little bit cheating, but I think it's fair to say that the way the book has constructed the bad things that have happened in the territories, it all does seem like an outside influence. A lot of the bad in the territories right now is specific to Morgan's evil influence over them. This idea that it was, before the problems in the territories are caused by individuals that don't belong here flipping over and mucking stuff up. So I think there is probably some truth to this general idea that this place represents innate goodness. It represents the white, and it has been corrupted. And part of what Jack is doing is kind of cleansing that corruption. And I mean, like, I think the second line, the book certainly says is true. Innate goodness must have its own power over evil. We see that as a matter of fact, as the chapters continue. But yeah, I mean, I guess it doesn't matter. The mirror represents the kindness of a stranger, right? Like, this is a token that he was given by a kind salesman, after experiencing, rudeness and being shortchanged by another salesman. This guy sees that he's sad and suffering because he recognizes his mother in one of the rugs he's selling, and gives him this thing to help him, to make him feel better. So regardless of whether the territories at a whole represent innate goodness, this talisman, and I don't mean the capital T talisman, but this talisman that he was given represents kindness and goodness and compassion. And so it in and of itself can have power over evil. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I like that. It's cool to think of that as a talisman, because it's like, yeah, that's sort of more of a talisman than the actual talisman is a talisman when you think about it. Like,
sure.
In terms of narrative function.
Mm-hmm.
I just, before we move on from this, like the little spider that says "fushing fiefs," it's so interesting because it kind of makes the hotel seem like a big old baby.
Yeah.
Now at this point, you're still kind of scared of the hotel, but especially later when he comes back to Richard and the little cute spider is still saying. It's like the hotel was always kind of this powerless little childish creature that spoke in this childish way. It almost makes it endearing in retrospect.
You're right. It's such an interesting choice, because it seems the exact opposite of threatening.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I mean, I agree with you, but also I think the book does a really good job of still kind of making you afraid of this place. Like, I love this paragraph here. You're worried about Sloat, the double doors whispered. Only now it wasn't just them. Now the voice Jack was hearing was the voice of the entire hotel. You're worried about Sloat and bad wolves and things that look like goats and basketball coaches who aren't really basketball coaches. You're worried about guns and plastic explosive and magic keys. We in here don't worry about any of those things, little one. They are nothing to us. Morgan Sloat is no more than a scurrying ant. He has only 20 years to live, and that is less than the space between breaths to us. We in the Black Hotel care only for the talisman, the nexus of all possible worlds. You've come as a burglar to rob us of what is ours, and we tell you once more we have other ways of dealing with fushing fiefs like you, and if you persist, you'll find out what they are. You'll find out for yourself. It's really badass, actually.
Yeah.
But I agree with you, to put fushing thieves in there like that does kind of pull the rug out from under it as well.
Yeah. Well, to be totally clear, I more mean in retrospect, it
sure.
comes off as cute especially because we kind of know, like, wow, this is actually kind of a powerless entity. Ultimately, like, it's not that Jack was guaranteed to win. He had to realize his own power. But once he realized his own power, it was like, oh no, this is not a threat to him.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think, I guess I just find it slightly mysterious why give the hotel this sort of childish affect if you're not, if you're not doing something with that. And I think they are. I think they're trying to show like it's not all it's cracked up to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think the evil in the King universe has always kind of had this almost in many ways childish, infantilizing tendency to it. Like, I'll talk once again about the reveal of the Crimson King at the end of the Dark Tower, where he's this crazed, it's just like it's the same kind of beat to me, that it's just this. When evil shows its true form, it's always kind of like, not that it's not threatening, but it's like, oh, you're a little silly, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think the Man in Black himself is often very silly at times. Mm-hmm. It's just like the way evil represents itself in this world.
Yeah, I agree.
I also like the beat here where it, like, Morgan Sloat has only 20 years to live. This man who like is doing all of this because he wants to rule the world. He's only got 20 years left, and he's in the best case possible, and he has no heir to hand this thing off to. In his mind, at least, he thinks his son is dead, and so like he's going to take over the world for what? For, you know, a decade of getting to enjoy it, and then death, and then nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I like that. That's a good point. Mm-hmm. How sort of meaningless his life really is. Yeah.
Yep. And does that mean that Morgan Sloat is going to survive this whole thing? That he's like, are they predicting the future in a real verifiable way?
Yeah, I kind of lean toward that, honestly. Like I kind of lean toward the idea that this is a prophecy that the hotel is making right here. Of course, sure. I could easily be disproven next week, so we'll see.
So as Jack walks further into the hotel, he starts to flip uncontrollably between the Black Hotel here and its equivalent over in the territories, which we see is this black, terrifying castle. It's a really wonderful moment. I really like what, like, he realizes, he's like, wait, were those stone? A portcullis? What is happening here? It's a really, really great moment.
Yeah, it's really fun. You know, I wish I had formally predicted this earlier, but I really did expect the grand finale to the story to be one where we'd be rapidly flipping between the worlds for enhanced dramatic impact. I didn't expect it to be exactly like this, but I did actually think, like, you know, we're going to take advantage of this world flipping dynamic for the climax.
Yeah, that's fair. I love it. I love it. I think it's fine that you didn't get there, but I do love it so much.
Yeah.
And we've already kind of talked about this, but this is where the book points out that Jack's Jason side has begun to overlap with his Jack side to create some third being, which was an amalgamation of both.
Yeah.
Which I love.
Yeah.
So Jack rounds a corner and finds behind a gate in the territories and a ballroom door in our world a massive black knight, which is his next challenge. I love these knights so much, Matt. First of all, like in a book playing so much into the idea of the hero's journey, the epic quest, etc., the idea that it's like his final task in this whole thing is, you know, invading a castle and fighting against an evil black knight is just, mwah, I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah, right. It's beautiful. I love it.
But the knights themselves are like, I love this idea that like in our world, it looks like an empty suit of armor with some ominous kind of soul behind it. But in the territories, it's kind of this terrifying zombie monster thing. It's so badass.
Yeah. It's incredibly cool. I agree. It's this is what I mean. Like, this is the part where I had to like stop reading, go somewhere quiet where I could focus on it, because it's just so awesome.
Yeah. But we see here, Matt, that Jack stands his ground against these approaching knights, pulls out his magical guitar pick and fucking jams out. But not before, importantly, this monstrous knight grabs him with his spiked gloves, which we are told stab him in his shoulders and arms so much that blood is coming out. Ever since it was pointed out to us that none of Jack's injuries in this book make it anywhere past the page that they're noted in, I can't stop noticing this. I can't stop noticing this at all. Yeah,
it's so true. In this particular case, I'm not even sure if the injuries are real, because these knights are indeed little more than like a glamour. That he ultimately is able to easily shrug off once he realizes that you know, the power is within him. So, you know, I don't know. In this case, I'm willing to say maybe the injuries are literally not real.
This is the only one where I think you could legitimately argue that.
In all the other cases, it's just his Christ-like magic that heals him immediately.
I mean, it is a good point, because as you noted earlier, everything the hotel seems to throw at him is all bullshit. It's smoke and mirrors. And so is it all smoke and mirrors except for these giant fucking knights that could easily stab him through the heart? That seems a little weird. So yeah, maybe it is just doesn't happen. Maybe if he had continued to believe in the power of these things, they would have actually hurt him. But once he has realized the central illusion of it all, there are no wounds to him, and there never were.
Yeah, I feel like if we want to accept the idea that this whole thing could have gone badly for him, then the way that it goes badly is he is too frightened. He can't accept that the power is within him, and then the knights actually do kill him. So there has to have been some level of danger.
Yeah,
but I think once he sees through it, then maybe he's just kind of above it.
Yeah. So Jack takes his guitar pick / tooth and says, "In her name, you filthy aborted thing," they shouted together, but it was one shout only, the shout of that single nature, Jack / Jason. "Get you off the skin of this world. In the name of the queen and the name of her son, get you off the skin of this world." And he fucking shoves it into the thing's face and it explodes. And it's so badass, and I loved it.
It's pretty badass.
So Jack defeats the armor, but then 3 more come up on him, and he's exhausted and tired, and Speedy is trying to urge him on, but he just wants to give up. Speedy gives him what little encouragement he can, and then leaves him presumably dying. We don't actually know, but that's the end of this particular chapter.
Yeah. We'll see.
Do you think Speedy's dead?
No, I don't think Speedy's dead. He didn't get a good death scene, so he can't be dead.
So we move on to chapter 42, Jack and the Talisman. And I love, God, Matt, this chapter begins. So we go from this moment of his lowest despair. He's defeated 1 armor, but he's exhausted as 3 more are approaching him. He can't summon up the power to defeat them. And then we open up this chapter with, "You made a mistake. You should have killed both of the Ellis brothers," which is just a total non sequitur when you're like, wait. I'm sorry, what?
What book is this?
Yeah. So we eventually do learn here that this line was from one of Jack's favorite of his mother's movies, a movie in which, the younger brother avenges his brother's death. And I want to talk about this for a bit, Matt. I'm so glad this is here, because one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is how the book hasn't really been working for me as in the way of Jack's mother was like the queen of the bees, right? Jack's mother was in movies. This was her life. It just to me seemed like an element of defining her character, sure, but kind of an irrelevant thing in regards to the overall narrative of the book as a whole. It just didn't matter to the plot, other than, well, queen of the bees, queen of the territories, you get it. And I love this because here in the climax, the way Jack summons the strength to defeat these monsters is through the connection to his mother, and through the connection specifically to his mother's job and what his mother did and how that influenced him. And it kind of ties it all together into a bow, nice and neat for me, that I really, really, really liked.
Yeah, it did feel really, really satisfying. I agree.
So in the movie, a kid marches out against overwhelming odds, and here said there was a sense that the kid was going to his death and knew it, but he meant to go on anyway. And although he was frightened, he was not striding up that street to the showdown with the slightest reluctance. He went eagerly, sure of what he meant to do, even though he had to fumble again and again with the buckle of his gun belts. Which, again, we've already talked about this, but this is Jesus going to his crucifixion. This is the little Ellis brother going to his doom, and it is Jack, summoning the strength from this story and going out to face his fight. So he marches up to these terrifying knights and just kicks the absolute shit out of him, Matt. He's like slipping between worlds and dodging, and it's just really, really good.
Yeah, it's great. It's kind of, it's delightfully goofy that he's running around the climax of this book shouting, "You should have killed both of the Ellis brothers." And, it really communicates a lot about his mental state of like giddiness, but also terror at the same time.
Yeah. That's such a great point, because I actually pulled out. So I've been doing this thing the whole book, Matt, right? Where every moment of some sort of Jack Sawyer randomly laughing in an inappropriate situation, I've been trying to pull it out for you. And here I think this is it coming to its head, right? Because as he's defeating the suits of armor, it says, "Come on," Jack shouted at the suits of armor and began to laugh. He couldn't help himself. Never had laughter seemed so strong to him, so potent, so good as this. It was like water from a spring or from some deep river. So this did matter, right? Jack's tendency to laugh in inappropriate situations ended up mattering to what the story was doing, that it is the source of goodness, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I feel like there's other references to laughter being something that's like pure and good and of the white, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. I think this was always in him. This, because I think, you know, the whole thing with the "you should have killed both of the Ellis brothers," like it's a kind of cavalier, like assured joyfulness in righteousness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like being able to laugh in the face of darkness is yet another part of that. And like that's part of what makes him a likable character, is like that he's not only is he fighting evil, but he's laughing in the face of evil, and that's even more powerful.
Yeah, I agree.
And the laughter is just kind of his innate goodness bubbling forth.
Yeah, I love that. Small thing I just wanted to point out here that you didn't get to experience, audiobooking, and the rest of our listeners, if you happen to be audiobooking, won't get to experience. But one of the things the book does structurally is when Jack starts to kind of flip rapidly between the two worlds and flip rapidly between his Jason self and his Jack self, the book uses kind of interesting indentations to represent this. So it's hard to explain this in an audio way, but I've copy pasted it here for you, Matt, where it's just like he side slipped momentarily into the territories, and side slipped and momentarily are both indented further to kind of visually demonstrate the sliding and slipping that the character is doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. There was no indication of that in the audiobook.
If they found a way to do that audibly, I would be very impressed.
Yeah.
So Jack defeats those three knights and begins to climb the stairs to the second floor into the Talisman that awaits him there when he is confronted by the final of the knights. This one is massive. It's described as like 11 feet tall and terrible. It's the worst one. And yet he climbs the stairs to meet it anyway. And small point here, Matt. As he's climbing the stairs, we get this line. Other figures are passing him on the stairs, figures he could not quite see as his fingers trailed over the wide banister that was not mahogany from the West Indies, but ironwood from the territories.
Oh my God, it's Tim's ironwood.
Ironwood. So, Matt, are the territories Midworld? I'm going to keep asking you this question.
I mean,
you know or don't know.
I think the book sort of said that they're not Midworld. It sort of said that there's other worlds, and there may be another world that's like the territories. But, you know, it could entirely, it totally could be just like a different part of Midworld, because Midworld's really fucking big, actually.
Yeah. It's so nebulously big.
It's intentionally nebulously big and intentionally ill-defined.
Yeah. So
like I in the back of my mind, I have had this sense of like, why can't it be part of Midworld? Like Midworld is the land of stories. Midworld is the land of you know, it's Narnia plus whatever else Stephen King wants it to be that day. Right? It's got robots, and it's got cowboys, and it's got castles, and it's got dragons. Why can't it have this world within it?
Sure.
And, you know, I don't know. I don't know if there is an answer to that. Like, I think it's literally intentionally ambiguous, and, you know, I say that and then it's going to be answered clearly one way or the other, like immediately, I'm sure. But I like the idea that it could be part of Midworld, but also they've left an opening for it to potentially not be part of Midworld. So
sure,
we'll see.
Yeah, we will see, or maybe we won't.
Yep.
You don't know.
I don't.
So as Jack climbs the stairs to meet this final night, he starts not flipping through worlds, but falling through them. And not just the two that we've seen, but all of them. He's just kind of falling through every piece of existence. And I love the writing here, Matt. It says, I do not exist simultaneously in all of them, Jack thought. That's the important thing. That's the difference. I'm flickering through each of them, probably too fast to see, and leaving a sound like a hand clap or a sonic boom behind me as the air closes on the vacancy where, for a millisecond, I took up space. I love this idea that he's just like rapidly falling through these worlds and like leaving this trail of sonic booms behind him. But like just, you know, metaphorically, the idea that like I am singular, I am individual, I take up space. As I travel through these things, as I travel through existence, I am taking up space. I am existing. I'm here. I'm doing this.
Mm-hmm. No, it's awesome. And clearly ideas that King loves to play with is the, stuff that he continues to play with into the Dark Tower. This falling between worlds kind of thing.
Definitely. So returning to one plane of existence, the one the story is on, Jack confronts the giant knight in front of him, and his guitar pick breaks, Matt. The energy is sapped from it. He used it up on the other knights, and he doesn't have any weapon to fight this giant knight in front of him. And that is, of course, where we learn that the power was inside him all along.
Yep.
And he uses that innate inner power to defeat the knight. And look, is this cheesy? Kind of, yeah. Uh-huh. And is this well trodden territory that the power was in you all along? Yes, 100%. That doesn't mean it doesn't work, right?
Yeah. Who cares that it's cheesy? Who cares? Like, it's well executed. It's also a concept that we've seen before in the Dark Tower universe. I mean, Callahan fails against the vampire because he expects the cross to protect him, but ultimately he has to realize that the cross is just a cross. The power of the white is within him and his faith. Yeah. We and then we see the contrast later in the Dark Tower. Mm-hmm. Callahan with the Skullpata statue, same exact thing. Yep. Same thing that Jack has to do here, where he has to realize, hey, this is just an object. The power of the white is in me, and it's in my faith, and it's in my own innate goodness, and it's really a perfect mirror to the Callahan scene, honestly.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I like how the King universe broadly, and we've been talking about King and not Straub a lot here, and I think that's because these chapters feel super Kingian to me.
Yes. Yes.
But I think broadly, and I say this acknowledging the irony of what I'm about to say, totems in this world, it's not that they don't have power, but becoming too reliant on the power is always seen as a bad thing. That like that things, objects only have as much power as you put in them, and to be overly reliant on those is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's like you have to have your own inner locus of goodness, or the token isn't going to do anything for you.
Sure. All right. So he, of course, defeats his last opponent. Jack opens the door containing the room that has the talisman, and our authors cheat, Matt. As he's about to walk through the door, they cut away from our character, our point of view character, and we're suddenly in Sunlight Gardner and Morgan Sloat's heads again. And we're like, we're not an interlude. This is cheating. You're not allowed to do this. It's a bastard. Just a bunch of bastards. I hate him.
Yeah, I threw my book against the wall.
We do see here that both Gardner and Sloat are standing over the seemingly dead body of poor Speedy Parker. Although, again, they're being rather, close to the chest about whether or not he's actually dead.
Nah, he's fine.
But the thing I really like here, Matt, is there's this brief moment as Morgan of Orris / Morgan Sloat is looking down at Speedy Parker / Parkus laying there, possibly dead, that we get this hint of this whole giant backstory that exists between Parkus and Morgan of Orris. That Parkus was one of the ones that originally branded Morgan as a traitor. He put slashes on his thigh that show him as a traitorous figure, and it's only because of the Queen's kindness that these slashes weren't put on his face. It's like this dip into a whole different past and world that the book just didn't have the time or the inclination to actually go into, because it didn't matter to the story that we're trying to tell. But just that we get a little hint of it, I think strengthens all these characters.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a different spin on how I thought, on who I thought Parkus was going to be.
Sure.
He's like this much more important figure. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, but he is a much more important figure, but barely. We don't actually, we don't know who Parkus is really,
right,
other than the twinner of Speedy Parker that Morgan of Orris hates because he did something. Obviously, he had some sort of legal authority in this world because he did something, but we don't really understand it. And I love that. I love how kind of mysterious and nebulous this whole thing is. I think the book would have been dragged down if we spent all this time. We already talked about like learning the prophecy, learning who Parkus is, doing all this stuff. It takes away from what is the main drive of the story, which is Jack's quest.
Yeah, I agree.
So we see Gardner and Sloat this is the irony of what we're doing here, Matt, is that we actually know, like, Jack grabs the talisman, and we see first from Gardner and Sloat's perspective as that happens, right? Before we've seen Jack actually grab it, we see Gardner and Sloat realize it's happening because the earthquakes happens and blinding light shoots out of the second floor of the hotel. We see all this happen, and yet Morgan is absolutely still convinced of his predestination. He's just like, good, everything is happening according to my plan, I think.
Yeah. It's delightful to watch him, walk direct, face first into a telephone pole, because he's such, we hate him so much, and we know that he's about to get his just desserts. So it's actually pretty satisfying. So
what do you think about the choice to cut away here in this moment? Like, I know you said you threw your book against the wall. It's very brief, right? It's only a few pages. So it's not like we're leaving Jack behind for an extended period of time. We're like, come on, I just want to see him get the fucking talisman. But it does, like, King and Straub chose to break that moment up and jump back to these other two characters. Why was this necessary, do you think?
He maintains a sense of threat. Like just because he's got the talisman doesn't mean you can relax, basically. Mm-hmm. And I think you consider that to be important, because otherwise there's a danger that you just completely deflate all of the tension, and then it's just this sort of prolonged victory lap of Jack, getting the talisman, and then everything is just like good from now on, and maybe they're not quite ready to release that tension yet. Sure.
I like that. I think it almost builds builds this moment as more important by cutting away from it briefly too. Like, because I think the authors recognize that you do have that bit of tension created by you're frantically turning through these pages, wanting to get back to Jack to see what this thing looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
So it kind of creates that desire for it that Jack is feeling right now. I think it works really well.
Yeah, totally.
So let's waste no time and get back with Jack and get our first view of the talisman itself. His face was bathed in a clear white radiance that was all colors: sunrise colors, sunset colors, rainbow colors. The talisman hung in the air above him, slowly revolving. It was a crystal globe, perhaps 3 feet in circumference. The corona of its glow was so brilliant it was impossible to tell exactly how big it was. Gracefully curving lines seemed to groove its surface like lines of longitude and latitude. And why not, Jack thought, still in a deep daze of awe and amazement. It is the world. All worlds in microcosm. More, it is the axis of all possible worlds. Singing, turning, blazing. Rainbow?
Yeah.
Rainbow?
Yeah. The more we learn about this thing, the more obviously Dark Tower it is. Everything's Dark Tower. It's the rainbow. Merlin's rainbow.
This is actually great because I don't know if you recall this, but one of the confusing moments for you was the idea that at the Dark Tower, that window is the colors of Merlin's rainbow, right? Mm-hmm. Representing Merlin's rainbow. And the question is like, well, what does Merlin's rainbow have to do with the Dark Tower, really? Uh-huh. And I love this idea. It's like, well, everything kind of that, like, I'm not saying that the talisman itself is one of Merlin's rainbow. No, it's not. The talisman is the tower. That's what it is. Right. Like right here, textually, it is the axis of all possible worlds. That is just literally what the tower is. But it has that same connection to the powers and magic of the worlds, to the guardians, to the rainbow, to all these things that are interconnected and woven through each other.
Yeah. I mean, I think the, Merlin's rainbow are basically like the different facets of magic or existence or something. And so, yeah, I don't know. What is white light? It is all of the colors together. And, you know, I've never quite known what to do with the fact that certain of the rainbow orbs are obviously evil. But maybe evil has to be part of the pattern too. Just like Morgoth was one of the angels, and Lucifer was one of the angels, and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, we see how easy it is to corrupt this kind of stuff, right? I mean, like we'll in the next chapter we'll talk about how close it is to corrupting the power of the talisman and how easy it is. So yeah, I think it's not out of the realm of possibility to say that these things weren't always that way, that the rainbow was corrupted and manipulated in some way.
Sure, I like that.
So I love here at the end, speaking of the talisman itself, that like this whole book has been about Jack going to the talisman, Jack traveling across the country to get to the talisman, to get there, to get it and save his mom. And in specifically the last few chapters have been just inundated with the talisman, like constantly screaming at him, come to me, Jack, come to me, come here. I love that as he walks into the room and sees it, these final moments, it's no longer Jack going to the talisman, but he calls it down to him, right? And so the talisman comes to him. I love that like it's as if this, like, he is the power in this moment, right? It's like you talisman, come to me. I don't come to you. Come down to me. I love that. It's so powerful to me.
Yeah, it's great. It's just hammering home the idea that he was really, the power was in him all along. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then we get this line, "Don't worry, Jack," a voice whispered. That voice was warm and clear. Down it came, a globe, a world, all worlds. It was glory and warmth. It was goodness. It was the coming again of the white. And, as always been with the white, and must always be, it was dreadfully fragile. Which is, I think this is really important. First of all, I totally forgot that we mentioned the white specifically in this book. This has been like the season 2 theme for me, that I just did not think the white was a thing that existed in the Stephen King universe as fucking early as it did. I am still absolutely flabbergasted that Salem's Lot directly mentions the white. And this is that book number 2, that like this has been a thing in King's mind from the very beginning. Here it is again, right? In the most deliberate sense here.
Yeah, right. It's the same symbol. It's the same energy. I mean, if the Dark Tower definitely connects together all of his books, but I think even more directly and sort of clearly, the white connects together all of his books as this symbol of like that force of goodness, which of which Christianity and Jesus are one manifestation, but which is actually the true, goodness beyond beyond reproach.
And I love the idea, as has always been with the white and must always be, it was dreadfully fragile. I love that sentiment. I think that is absolutely in line with everything we've seen about goodness and evil in this world, that goodness is powerful but so easily destroyed, right? That like, to go back to our constant Star Wars metaphor, like, is the dark side stronger? No, the white is actually stronger 100%. It's just so easily destroyed. Like it is so easy to lose it. It is so easy to, like, when its full power is brought to bear, like, there's nothing it can't defeat. But it is very easy to at least cover it with darkness temporarily at times.
I mean, I think the Salem's Lot is a good sort of example of this, because, like, okay, what happens to the town? Oh, everybody dies. like the darkness scores a heavy blow, but then the white comes, kills Barlow, wipes out the town. So a sort of balance is restored, and in the end, this ancient evil is destroyed. But there's always a cost. Like, all these stories, the white always, I don't want to say always wins, but it seems like in all of the stories we've read for season 2, the white always wins, but there's always a heavy cost.
Sure.
And I think that's the fragility.
Yeah, no, I agree. So from here, we move into a relatively short chapter, chapter 43, News from Everywhere. And here at the top, Matt, I just want to say that this is such a good fucking chapter. Like this is, so what this is a series of vignettes that basically demonstrate to the reader the power of the talisman. We kind of rapidly cut through all the other characters we met over the course of this journey and see how they react and how the world reacts to Jack grabbing the talisman, to completing his quest. And it's just fucking great.
Yeah, I love it. It's interesting because the book's not over. Like the climax isn't even really over. But this is a sort of premature denouement running us rapidly through a whole bunch of like closure and catharsis and all these positive feelings before we've even really, he hasn't even left Mount Doom. He's still inside the volcano chamber.
Yeah. So he hasn't necessarily thrown the ring in there yet, right?
We're not sure of our victory, but I it's interesting. It's very interestingly placed. But I do love it though. Mm-hmm.
So first we see Lily Sawyer not out of the woods yet, but we see here that she is aware of her son, aware that her son is alive and well and everything's going to be okay. It's a really short but touching scene. I'm glad we cut to her first of all,
Yeah. It's good to sort of, it gives us a feeling of like, okay, I think everything's going to be okay. I'm not sure, but I think everything's going to be okay.
Yeah. Then Donnie Keegan, one of the kitchen boys at the Sunlight home, we see he suddenly realized that he does indeed love Jack Jesus. This is that moment with your year-old friend Ferd Janklow said, "You love him, don't you?" And Donnie says that yes, he does. He admits in this moment, yes, I do love him. I do love Jesus. Uh-huh. And I this writing, Donnie had known, for one brief moment he had known what that feeling of love and triumph actually meant. That passed quickly, the way dreams do upon waking. But he never forgot the feeling itself, that almost swooning sensation of grace for once fulfilled and delivered instead of promise and then denied. That feeling of clarity and sweet, marvelous love, that feeling of ecstasy at the coming once more of the white. It's beautiful.
Yeah. What a beautiful idea, but what beautiful writing to express such a beautiful idea.
Grace for once fulfilled and delivered instead of promised then denied. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I love it. I love every time he writes about the white.
Mm-hmm. So next we see that evil Judge Fairchild, who we learn is no longer a judge and is about to go to prison for his crimes. For him, the coming of the white means death, and so he kills himself. And we don't feel bad about that at all.
Yeah, fuck you, Judge. It's great.
Speaking of something we don't feel bad about, Smokey Updike is sitting in his stupid bar, and then suddenly his eyes explode, and then so does he.
Like, if I hadn't read that and you said that, I would assume that was a joke.
Nope.
Because, like, it's hilarious because I was expecting some kind of, subtle vengeance that, maybe Smokey wouldn't even be aware of, like maybe the woman he's been abusing walks out on him, but it's like, no, it's like the fucking wrath of God strikes his tavern and kills him and everyone in it.
Yeah. This is really interesting, right? Because this is the world of Stephen King saying without any subtlety that, like, in this world, bad things are punished, right? Like this is like, we have this terrible judge. Like, this is a book that up until this point has been about how the system abuses and fails young boys, right? We've talked about that. Like that has been Jack's experience throughout this whole thing. He's either been manipulated, abused, sexually, not actually sexually assaulted, but sexually propositioned. Like, over and over again, he's gone through these terrible, terrible things in this world that have tried to rip the soul out of him. And at the end of the book, he holds up this talisman, he completes this quest, and the world kills all those things. The judge dead. Smokey Updike exploded. The Sunlight home burns to the ground, right? Like, the evil in the world is not just like pushed back into its corner, but it is literally blown up. And that's a powerful statement that King's making here about how evil and good exist in this world. That when goodness comes, evil is just annihilated.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely satisfying as hell from a storytelling perspective. I'm not sure if we live in a world that works that way, but that's fine. It's still,
we do not.
Still a beautiful idea.
I mean, we don't literally, right? Yes, like good, but like to move on to the religious again and to go more spiritual, like the idea that in a spiritual sense, in a karma sense, right? That good will be rewarded, evil will be punished in some sense. I think that is the world that Stephen King wants to live in. I think, we've talked about this a lot, and I think we're not quite at the end of this book yet, but at least this part of the end of this book, once again, to me, exposes Stephen King as a big old softy who wants to believe that the world is good, that the world is right, and that yes, there are terrible, awful, evil, monstrous things that exist in this world, but at the end of the day, we can and will beat them. And it's so funny that the master of horror, the master of it's this connotation that is true, but he's such a softy. He believes in the goodness of things.
Yeah. It's true. I mean, again, we've read several books this I don't know, year or however long it's been. Mm-hmm. A lot of bad stuff has happened in them, but it seems like there's always some, redemption or goodness or victory mm-hmm. for the light, even though there is, there's always a cost. We often lose a hero, right? But yeah, Softy is what he is. It's mm-hmm. funny because he is also, the master of horror. He is also showing us these really screwed up things. But yes, he is also a softy at the same time.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. So there's a few more things that we see in this whole thing. We go back to Thayer very briefly and see that it kind of very quickly reverts to the way it was that day. We see the headmaster suddenly become a dog temporarily when the bells go off. The part that I think is interesting, where we see Albert the Blob, as he's called, suddenly deciding that he wants to stop eating junk food and get healthier, get thinner. And we get to see that he does that, And I love this line here. For the first time in his life, he felt that he might survive his mother's love. That's so interesting to me, because so much of this book is about a mother's love for her son and a son's love for his mother. And now in this brief kind of throwaway moment that I don't think they thought about more than a couple minutes, but just like, here's another side of what that could be, where his mother, out of love for Albert, is constantly sending him boxes and boxes of junk food that he is eagerly eating. So it's another twist on the ways in which love is good and pure, but can also be destructive and terrible.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I didn't think too much about it either, but I'm glad you pull it out. Mm-hmm. I just love the idea where it's specifically kind of a horrible thing that saves him. It's the vision of, horrible, disgusting territories worm things crawling out of his food, which mm-hmm. is kind of a nightmare. But it's like, well, it's a nightmare that motivates him to kind of save his life. So yeah, it's very interesting.
Speaking of mothers, though, I do like, just to mention it briefly, we see Wolf's mother, who has given birth to a new litter. She has 3 new little wolf pups, and she's just hanging out under a full moon, happy with her new life. She lost her poor son, but she's got new life here, and so that's, again, optimism. And not much to say about that, but it felt good to read.
Yeah. It lifts your heart a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So we move to our final chapter of the week, chapter 44, The Earthquake. We're back with Jack, who is himself, we see in this moment, simultaneously everything, everywhere, all at once. He's experiencing the entire universe at once. So we can kind of assume, I don't think the book ever comes out and says this, Matt, but we can kind of assume that like all the little vignettes that we were just party to, like Jack saw all of that mm-hmm. and he experienced all of it at once, because he is everything, right? He's God. He's literally God in this moment.
Yep. I agree. I think he did.
But he doesn't want to be God, because as he realizes he's got, it says he was God or something so close as to make no difference. No, Jack screamed in terror. No, I don't want to be God. Please, please, I don't want to be God. I only want to save my mother's life. So he is granted the talisman. It basically makes him into God. And then he rejects it. He rejects that idea. And so we have to talk about this because we've been talking about this idea that Jack is Jesus Christ, like throughout the entire book. I think this is a metaphor that is not just subtextual. I think the book wants to make this very clear. But where does the rejection of godlyhood fall into that metaphor in your mind?
I don't know exactly. I mean, you know, there's no mention of Gan in this book. You know, I keep thinking about the idea that Gan is the name for God that has been invented in the later Dark Tower, which is interesting because the white doesn't seem to be a person, right? And I think we've talked in the past about the idea that like are Gan and the white the same thing? And is it even possible to have an identity when you are identified with the force of goodness and so forth? I'm kind of rambling here because I don't really know how to approach the idea. In Christian mythology, they say Jesus ascended into heaven and he's seated at the right hand of the Father. Yeah. Which they don't say that he ascended into heaven and became one with the Father. They don't say that he ascended into heaven and sat on the throne of God. There's clearly still a distinction between those two. So I think as far as that goes, it's still sort of in line with him being a Jesus character. But he basically just says like, no, I'm just gonna go back to earth now.
I mean, you're right. But Jesus is God and God is Jesus. They are in essence one and the same. Like God created Jesus and then he went home, and like there's certainly a distinction here, yes, but it's not that important of a distinction between resurrected, ascended Jesus and God themselves. It's not important enough of a distinction to matter. So I mean, you could essentially say it's a one-to-one relationship between Jesus and God, and I don't think you'd be wrong. And so I agree with you that on the surface this would be if Jesus says, "Nah, I'm out. I only wanted this one thing. Actually, I didn't want all of this stuff." And I like that because maybe that isn't what's supposed to happen for Jack, like maybe that's what was supposed to happen to Jason, right? That Jason was supposed to, be resurrected and ascended and become seated at the right hand of the Father, blah, 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 become God or close enough where it doesn't make a difference. But that was never Jack's goal. That was never Jack's want, his desire. And of course, we have to say that this is diametrically opposed to our villains as well, who want that exact thing, right? Like Sloat wants to become God, basically, and so our hero is given that and refuses it and says, "No, I don't want that. What I want is the simple thing. I want to save my mom. That's all I've ever wanted. That's why I'm on this quest." So it's like the power is granted to the person who wants it the least, which is very fitting.
Yeah, I like all of that. That sounds really good to me.
Sure. All right. So as an earthquake begins to destroy the town around him, Jack examines the talisman itself, and we return to one of our original conversations, Matt. We return to Jack's propensity to blame himself for everything, right? And so he's holding the talisman and he kind of like tests its strength by like pushing on it a little bit. And what he says to himself is, "You may be killing 1 billion people doing that. Fires, floods, God knows what. Remember the building that collapsed in Angola, New York after..." "No, Jack," the talisman whispered, and he understood why it had yielded to gentle pressure of his hands. "It was alive. Of course it was. No, Jack, all will be well. All will be well, and all manner of things will be well. Only believe. Be true. Stand. Do not falter now." So a beautiful sentiment where the talisman basically tells Jack, stop worrying about that. It's not for you to worry about. It's going to be fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if you remember. Did you remember these lines when you read them?
These lines from earlier in the book or from somewhere else?
No, from somewhere else.
Oh, I mean, I recognize them as being reminiscent of those lines. Yes,
Yeah.
I did. Yes.
So for those that don't remember, at the very, very end of the Dark Tower, as Roland has walked through the door and has realized that he's back in the middle of the desert, and this is just one big loop, a voice that is fading is talking to him, and the voice says, "This is your sigil," whispered the fading voice that bore with it the dusk sweet scent of roses, the scent of home on a summer evening. "Oh, lost! A stone arose an unfound door. A stone arose a door. This is your promise that things may be different, Roland, that there may yet be rest, even salvation." A pause, and then, "If you stand, if you are true." So there we go again. Be true, stand, once again appearing, because it's the Dark Tower.
Yep, it's totally the Dark Tower. This book, so the thing that jumps out to me about that line and the mirroring of that line and the connection between the Dark Tower and this book is the importance of nobility, the concept of nobility here. Because, say what you want about Roland, he makes a lot of mistakes, but I think undeniably the reason the Tower calls to him is that he has this nobility and he values nobility. I'm remembering his argument with Eddie on the beach when he says, "Hey, where'd you get your sense of nobility and purpose shot off?" And like that to me, I keep thinking back to that moment because it's such a defining Roland moment where it's like, yeah, he has his flaws clearly. He's clearly written to be a character who has flaws, but he has this abiding nobility and willingness to stand up for what he thinks is right.
Yeah.
And that is totally a quality that is important in this story as well. The idea of nobility is central to this story.
Yeah. So, I mean, is that what, when you hear the phrase "stand, be true," is that what that means to you? Is just a general sense of nobility?
Well, I mean, I think it's got to be a little bit complicated because like, Roland's not standing and being true when he lets Jake fall to his death.
No.
Like he maybe in that moment he thinks, like, in his desperation, like, the man in black's gonna get away and then I'm gonna lose my chance at the tower. But that's like a sickly sort of greed that's not really being true, Right. And I think even in that moment, if you asked him, like, was that a noble thing to do, he would have said, no, that wasn't a noble thing to do. I forgot what your question was, but
so I think this is a good point. I mean, I think Roland, as you said, like, has the potential of great nobility, and what the quote at the end of the book is saying is, like, there is a way for you to get out of this eternal damnation that you're in right now, this forever loop of suffering, and the way to do that is by being true, is by if you stand, if you are true. Like, these are things that you have not done, are not, but you have the potential to be so. And arguably the reason why the Dark Tower is putting him through this is because it wants him to achieve that. It wants him to get to this elevated, greater existence of nobility, as you said. But he's not there yet.
Yeah. I think he certainly shows flashes of it, but then he also makes terrible, selfish choices. So,
yeah. It's great. I love how it ties together. It's just perfect. I again, this is a thing that I forgot about, and then I'm reading the Talisman and I see "Be True, Stand," and I'm like, it's the Leo DiCaprio pointing at the TV screen meme.
I mean, what I love about it is it's not just that it ties together in a sense of, like, I recognize that, but it really does change the way I think about the Dark Tower. Like, I honestly think much more about the idea, that Roland has this idea of nobility to his character, which is it's there, but it's not. It didn't really pop out to me until we read this book.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to say. I would not have wanted to do season 2 with you if the whole thing would just be us going like, That's like the other thing that we saw in the other book.
Right.
I think that the reason why people love the ways in which these books are all connected and the way they tie into each other is not just, throw away for fun references, or I recognize that word or that phrase or that sentence or that character, but like this is filling in an understanding of a world and the creator of that world and what he thinks and what he believes and what these stories say to us. And the Dark Tower is and will always be the center of this whole world, but the spokes around the edge of that wheel can fill us in on a lot more information about how that whole wheel turns. And I think that's fascinating and wonderful. And I have not been disappointed by any of the stories we've chosen to fill in that information.
Yeah, well said. I like that.
Except for
Yes, well.
So anyway, Jack gingerly gets down the stairs despite there being an earthquake going on because he's terrified of dropping the talisman. He finds Richard standing there and uses the talisman to heal all his wounds and also to kill that damn annoying fishing thief spider. So Richard, cured of his illness, asks to hold the Ring of Power, the talisman, and for a brief moment, Jack refuses. And we get this line, Matt. In his hands, the talisman suddenly radiated a terrible chill, and for a moment more frightening to Jack than all of the earthquakes and all of the worlds that have ever been or ever will be, it turned a gothic black. Its white light was extinguished. In its rich, thundery, thanatropic interior, he saw the Black Hotel on turrets and gamtrels and gables, on the roofs of cupolas which bulged like warts stuffed with thick malignancies, the Kabbalistic symbols turned, wolf and crow and twisted genital star. Would you be the new Agincourt then? The talisman whispered. Even a boy can be a hotel, if he would be. So it's tempting.
Tempting.
It's the ring.
It's Bilbo going at the camera.
Honestly, I've seen that movie enough to know that noise was extremely close to the actual noise in the movie.
Thank you. Yeah, there was a scarring scene for everyone. It is the temptation. It is the ring. It's clearly the ring. It's nobody knew this until I came along, but there's a lot of Lord of the Rings references in these books. I wonder, like, I maybe this is my imagination running away from me, but I kind of like the idea that like the hotel is like the last person who coveted the power of the orb and succumbed to it and became its permanent keeper. Much like, Gollum living under the mountain and turning into a monster.
Sure.
I don't know. Just a fun thought.
I like that. I mean, I think it does kind of go a little bit of the way to answer like the question of like, how did the talisman get here? Like, how is it a thing that is surrounded by this central goodness that has become surrounded by this terrible, terrible, monstrous evil hotel and because the last person or thing that gained control of it refused to let it go. That's exactly how. And I really like that.
It feels right to me.
Yeah. So but in this moment we see that once again it is the voice of his mother that brings Jack back from the brink here and allows him to release his hold on the object, giving it to Richard to hold. And that's really wonderful. I love the way she talks to him in this moment. Like we talked way a long time ago about the idea, the relationship between Jack and his mother, right? This kind of not like informal kind of friendly relationship, right? And I love the way she talks to him here. It was like, Jack, if you went all this way, did all these things just to hold on to that thing, then you might as well just stay where you are, right? It's this perfectly written interaction that does exactly to him what it needs to.
Yeah, they've got this kind of sassiness and honesty between them where it feels really right.
Love it.
So yeah, we get to this point. I remember you asked me a while back, like, what is the point of Richard being here, and I was like, I was actually kind of seeing more of a Sam Frodo thing, or maybe even a Gollum thing coming into play here. And I think what it really is, to the extent that he serves a purpose, it's like he lets him hold it to show that he's not under its sway. And then I think it's also important that Richard is the one who walks out of the hotel holding it, because of plot reasons that we're about to see. So.
Yeah. Is that true? I thought he gave it back, but no, you might be
right. Maybe he did. I don't know. Well,
I think regardless, I think you're right that Richard being here allows Jack to go through the temptation in this moment and pass the test, right?
Yeah. I think that's important.
So if Richard was not here, he would not do that. Which that is a fair question to ask right now. And again, the book is not over. We still have a few more chapters, but we've yet to see a literal textual reason for why Richard had to be here, for why Richard had to go into the hotel with him. Mm-hmm. And this seems to be the best guess.
Yeah.
So the two decide to walk out the front door of the hotel, not sneak out the back. I love the line Jack says here. "We ain't ditching this place, Richie. We're going out like paying guests. I feel like I've paid plenty. What do you think?" It's just, I love Jack's attitude here. He's such a wonderful character.
I agree. Like, there's so much like swagger and humor to his character, especially in the latter half of the story, I would say.
Yeah. Again, and just, thinking back, remembering how not there that was when the book started.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when they do walk out, Sloat sees that his son is still alive and leaning on Jack for support. Jack, who I think holds the talisman, but could be Richard holds the talisman. But regardless, he sees this whole thing play out and he loses it completely, Matt. He kind of just goes fully insane here. Uh-huh. We see here that he raises the thumbs into his ears and slammed them deep inside, so deep that it hurt. Then he stuck out his tongue and waggled his fingers at Mr. Jack Dirty Motherfuck and soon to be dead Sawyer. A moment later, his upper teeth descended like a drop gate and seared the tip of his wagging tongue. Sloat didn't even notice it. So that's crazy.
He just goes totally nuts. Yeah, it's very, it's I don't know. It's funny because it's actually really satisfying to watch this villain that you hate just totally disintegrate in a spectacular way.
Yeah. So Morgan ordered Gardner to shoot Jack in this moment, thus causing him to drop the talisman. And while I'm talking, by the way, I have the book open here and I'm frantically trying to see who was holding the talisman.
Okay.
I think it's Jack.
Okay.
So he orders him to shoot him and thus dropping the talisman, but the world has other plans, and Richard sees this. Jack doesn't. Right before he pulls the trigger, the talisman itself seems to attack Sunlight Gardner. It explodes his gun and his stupid face. We see that Gardner has lost an eye, his gun, and his fingers, which fingers, the White really likes to take people's fingers from them when they do bad things, doesn't it?
It does?
Roland lost his fingers,
man.
Yes,
the fingers. Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, it does. It's got a lot of fingers. It loves fingers.
It loves fingers. Say? But despite all this, we see that Sunlight Gardner pulls out his knife and goes charging for Jack and Richard anyway, while screaming that the boys are bad. It's axiomatic. I actually wanted to talk to you about this term because it's something that is used again and again and again, right? This is kind of Sunlight Gardner's ongoing refrain is all boys are bad. It's axiomatic. I don't know. What did you think of the use of this here? Is there anything more we can read into this?
I mean, I'm just gonna like the simplest. I think I just took it in the simplest way, which is like his worldview is such that he just to him boys are bad. It's a fundamental law of the cosmos. It's an axiom being a presupposition. We don't deduce it from anything else. It's just the bedrock of our reasoning. There's nothing deeper than the point that all boys are bad. And like, okay, something terrible probably happened to this character, right? He was probably treated horribly. Because how else do you, a man, come to the belief that all boys are bad? Either you were told as a youth that you are bad and that all boys are bad and that you're some kind of monster and you hate yourself, or maybe you were abused by other boys and you came to the belief that all boys are bad because of how you were treated. In either case, if you think about it, I think you end up with just a modicum of sympathy for this Gardner / Osmond character. Obviously, that doesn't extend past the point of him, recapitulating all these horrors upon all of the children as he does. But I never said this outright, but ever since he first started saying all boys are bad, it's axiomatic, I was like, oh, I wonder what happened to this guy. What horrible shit happened to this guy to make him see the world that way?
Yeah. It doesn't seem like we're ever going to learn that either.
It does not. I agree.
But no, I like that. I like that a lot. I don't have any thoughts. It struck me this time. He uses this word over and over again. It's kind of like his expression.
Yeah. Inconceivable. Yeah.
Exactly. So for his part, Morgan calmly heads down to the beach. He knows that is where Jack will be going because Speedy will be down there and he wants to check on him. And so he's just going to go down there and deal with this whole thing himself. And that is where our chapter ends and this week's reading ends as well. So that's where we have to leave off, Matt. I'm sorry that I made you wait a whole week before you could figure out what happens.
It's okay, Scott. I've told you I'll get my revenge.
But you don't have to worry because the next chapter 4 to 5, is titled "In Which Many Things Are Resolved on the Beach." So you're going to get some resolution.
Oh, thank God.
So that is it for our reading this week. Next week, we were going to be finishing the book. If you can believe it, the Talisman is just about over. We've only got a few chapters left. It's a very short reading as well. I think it's the shortest of the book so far, which will give us time to kind of really dig into that ending, which will be fun.
Excellent.
But before we go for the week, we do have a discussion question to talk about, Matt. Our discussion question from last week was what?
Bad dads? What are your favorite bad dads in fiction? And from our illustrious question answers, we have many answers. First from Eric T. This is a tough one. I tried to stick to King because the option set is huge even there, let alone all of storytelling. A hallmark of bad dads is some form of absenteeism, but it can get worse by way of actively doing harm. Probably the first to come to mind is Jack Torrance, but like you guys said about Homer, it's maybe not quite fair to label him that way. Jack legitimately was doing right by and making the unselfish and right decisions for his family, but he ended up in a situation he couldn't handle. Could he be a better dad? Yeah. Was he a bad dad? Sure. But even if the worst part of it, part of what slowed up the protagonist was that they couldn't believe Jack was doing what he was doing. That is, his kid has seen largely good dad Jack. So a bad dad would leave more of a wake of destruction behind him. So maybe identifying the worst dad involves finding the most messed up kid. Interesting. And then they go on to say, so look for messed up Dark Tower kids. Jake is in a pretty rough headspace and will grow to hate his dad, but he was provided for. He took to Roland immediately as a father figure because he knew he lacked one, but he hadn't been ruined to the idea. So that's really interesting. To consider the effect on the kid. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, I think this is a great first question to start with, Matt, because like the when you say what is your favorite or the worst or whatever you want to define this question as bad dad, one of the first things you have to do is like, what does it mean to be a bad father, right? Like, what does that mean? And I think in some cases the distinction is rather easy, and in some cases it's not quite so easy. And I love the idea of complicating a character like Jack Torrance, who obviously not a good dude, obviously tried to murder his family, and not the best father to be sure, but like I don't know, it's very simplistic to just say, oh yeah, well he was just a bad dad. He was suffering from a disease, right? And I don't know.
I think Jack Torrance is probably written more from the perspective of a man trying to struggle with his own feelings of inadequacy as a father.
Yeah.
Whereas some fictional bad dads are just like, fuck this guy that I'm writing right now. He sucks. They're not meant to be empathic figures at all. Whereas Jack Torrance is a flawed character who also has some positive qualities.
Yeah, no, I like that. Steve L says Jack Torrance is about the worst. See, so everyone has different definitions here. This is good. Although the book at least made him human and trying to do right for half the book. There you go. See, it's complicated.
Yeah.
Jenny's dad in Forrest Gump was awful. Yes, very true.
Yes, he was.
So, you know who else was awful? That movie.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that. Yep. All right. Jennifer D says, favorite bad dad is easy. Dr. Evil. I'm probably biased because the fruit of his despicable loins is Seth Green, who will always be my boyfriend. Richie Tozier. Beep, beep, Richie. Yes, Dr. Evil. It's just a hilariously bad dad. Like, genuinely hilariously. It's very funny.
Yeah. So, I mean, my wife is 3.5 years younger than me. And so I'm not that much older than her, but like in the media that came out when I was a teenager versus media that came out when she was a teenager perspective, like I'm a lifetime older than her.
Right.
And this never becomes more clear than with stuff like Austin Powers, which is a movie that was like, I remember this movie coming out and I remember everyone I know like falling in love with this movie. It was such a giant hit. And then the other day I was talking about it with my wife and she's just like, yeah, I never saw that. Like, what? What? Everyone has seen that. Like, it's just remarkable.
It's funny because I have seen it, but I don't think I saw it when it came out, actually.
Interesting.
But that's
that come out?
Because I was sheltered. I wasn't really sheltered. I just didn't happen to see that one movie. Whatever.
1997. Yeah.
Yeah. I wasn't even in the US. That's why I didn't see it.
That's why you didn't see it. Yeah.
Cool.
Baby Kenny Digger Sam says, so many shitty dads to pull from. Initially, I thought I'd stick with the more humorous bad dads in order to keep it light. Dr. Evil, Al Bundy, George Bluth. But then I thought of ABC's Lost. Yes. Thank you, Sam. And the overwhelming number of characters with some serious daddy issues. For me, Locke's dad, Anthony Cooper, takes the prize as the absolute worst dad on that show. An absentee father who enters John's life to con him out of a kidney, then eventually shoves him out of an 8th-story window, paralyzing Locke. When the island heals Locke, Locke interprets that as being special, and everything he does, he believes in. So everything he believes in is because he has to be special. Because if he isn't special, then his father was right. Such a tragic story arc. Like the Tower and the Talisman, Lost is about the journey and not the ending. But I like the ending, Sam. I really like the ending.
The Locke's arc is like a perfect example of my problem with that show, which is that it's just like punching you in the nuts over and over.
Well, that's life, man.
But I like books that are happy and light and don't have meanings or points.
Sometimes bad stuff happens, but good still exists, Matt. We've just discussed this.
I guess so. But yes.
Yeah, I mean, Lost is the bad dad show.
It is.
Name one father in that movie, in that show, that's not fucking terrible. I don't think you could do it.
Every father's terrible. Locke's dad is definitely the worst.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, whenever I think about that storyline, I'm like, wait, was he really his dad, or was he just some con man who wanted his kidney? And I think the reason I asked that question is I don't want to believe that it was really his dad who would do that to him.
It was really his dad.
Yeah, which is it's fuck that guy. All right, Feli Dow says, all this Bible talk made me think of Lot. There's a great deal that one could say about this Old Testament weirdo, but in the interest of brevity, I'll just summarize the highlights of Lot's very bad and completely bizarre daddying career. One day, Lot happened to be hosting 2 guests in his home. A crowd of rowdy sodomites hears about this and demands that he surrender his guests to the mob so that they can have an orgy. Lot's solution is to try and appease the crowd by offering them his 2 virgin daughters instead. Later, Lot and his 2 daughters are hanging out in a cave in some remote wilderness. His daughters decide that because there are no other men around to impregnate them, They'll just have to get Lot completely smashing drunk and then sleep with him instead. The daughters then proceed to do exactly that, and both of them bear children from this act of incestuous rape. There are several different ways one can read Lot's story, some of which cast him in a more sympathetic light, but I think everyone can agree that no matter how you spin it, it's hard to argue that Lot is a good father. I agree with your interpretation, Felidal.
Yeah, this is why, like I talked about last week, reading the Bible is fun, because the Old Testament especially, there's some wild shit in there, and I think the story of Lot is definitely one of them. And I know what you mean about the other interpretations, and yes, I think a lot of this stuff is what is the word for like a parable? Because it's not parabolic, because that doesn't make sense. Is there a phrase for it?
Probably, Scott.
I'm going to say parabolic because that's funny.
Yeah, that's a parabolic story.
But yeah, there's some... it's a very old book. It's a very old book with a lot of very dated morality, especially in the Old Testament. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, we still love that shit, though. We still love... It's like tabloid shit, you know? It's great.
Next up, we have Bell West Deserves Better, who says, I'll keep it short and sweet. Bob Ewell from To Kill a Mockingbird is the shittiest father in fiction. He gets an innocent man executed and tries to murder children, all in an attempt to cover up his physical and sexual abuse of his own daughter. I say, fuck you, Bob Ewell, now and forever. Yes.
Fuck that guy.
And the reason that book works as well as it does is because this man is just clearly an absolute monster, and he gets away with all of it. And it's infuriating.
Indeed, I agree. So
we need a talisman to come blow his eyes up.
That we should rewrite that book where he gets blown up at the end by a magic orb. All right. I think I don't recognize this name for the next person. Main ISS. It's probably a pun in there that I'm missing. I'm sorry.
Probably.
Wouldn't the obvious answer for bad dad be Roland Deschain of Gilead? The guy's an addict and let his son die twice. It's true. And then he let his other son die.
Real son doesn't count.
And he let let everything. And then he let his second is actually he let three sons die. He killed one. Are you
counting Mordred? That doesn't count.
I'm counting Mordred, Scott. You can't stop me.
Who's worse, Roland Deschain or Stephen Deschain? Which is the worst dad?
Roland.
Yeah, Stephen did not allow his son to fall down a pit. So
yeah, Stephen was in a real difficult situation. Okay.
It's the eternal justification. You don't understand the situation I was in.
You don't understand. He was under a lot of pressure.
Shortstop 88 says, you fools! Bad dads are such a staple of anime that common jokes on the anime subreddit are about characters being father of the year after it is revealed how terribly they have treated their children. Shortstop, let me tell you something about bad dads. It's a staple of everything. Storytelling, bad dads. It's just everywhere.
We probably did open ourselves up to this one.
I could name at least 6 bad dads in One Piece alone. One such bad dad is a character I actually really like. He's just not a good father. This dad abandons his son while he's very young, choosing to carry on with family he actually wants to be with and some weird dog-like creature because it's anime. Egged on by another father, the son ends up dying. Spoilers, I guess. Don't care. While fighting the dog thing. While the son has a tragic story, he also had some cool spider powers. Of course he did, which were pretty interesting to see. I'm adding my color commentary as I go. I know you folks at home don't know that, but maybe you can tell. But yeah, my favorite bad dad is Roland Deschain from The Dark Tower. Oh shit, he got me. He tricked me.
He did trick you. We've both been tricked.
I read the answer beforehand. I wonder how quickly you realized who I was talking about there. Hopefully y'all didn't read ahead of time of the answer or else the fun was lost. No, I did.
I didn't. You got me. I'm an idiot.
Did he get you?
He did. I'm a fucking idiot. I'm just gonna leave now. I'm just gonna walk away.
That was very fun though, Shortstop. I appreciate what you're doing with. You're trying to say that Dark Tower is an anime. Yep. Unfortunately, you are correct. And I have to hate it now. So the show is canceled. You win.
he did successfully make me realize how anime The Dark Tower is. So
it's not though.
I mean, I literally couldn't tell that he wasn't describing One Piece because I don't know anything about One Piece.
I mean, he's choosing to accentuate all the weirdest possible parts of The Dark Tower. So
see, look,
it feels like cheating.
If we cede the ground of weirdness to anime, then we're in trouble. So
yeah, that's true. Anime is not the weird thing. It's the look. I don't want to get in trouble here. So I'm just gonna move on.
Let's just move on.
Anime is great. I love it. It's the best. I watch it every day. It's all I watch.
Yeah, me too. All 84001 says, clapping back on our terrible take at the end of last episode, Homer Simpson is not a bad dad at all. He's just selfish and an idiot, but he fundamentally cares about his family. Cue the do it for her scene from that episode with Maggie. Shut up, you're crying. I am crying. I cry every time I even think about that episode, all 84001.
The problem with Homer Simpson is like any episodic sitcom, he is both a wonderful, perfect father and a terrible, monstrous father, depending on what the episode calls for.
And what season and so forth.
Yeah.
All 84 goes on to say, best dads. My first thought was Tywin Lannister, but then I remembered Craster. While Tywin doesn't love or respect his children, he's at least concerned with setting them up for the good life with money and power. Well, not Tyrion. Craster, on the other hand, oh baby, what a total piece of shit. I don't know if it's worse to be born his son or his daughter. The sons are sacrificed to the others, bad, but at least quick. Well, as far as we know. His daughters are allowed to live, but only to become members of his weird incestuous harem. They inevitably get pregnant and provide nasty Craster with even more fuck slaves, like some kind of Russian nesting doll of incest. Incestception. For real bad dad, I highly recommend the podcast The Clearing, about a woman who begins to suspect her father of being a murderer. It gets worse or better from there.
I'm disappointed you read that as nasty Craster and not what ALH wrote here, which was nasty Crasty, which is perfect.
Nasty Crasty. Sorry, I just misread it.
The Amazing Duck 42 says, Mr. Wormwood from Matilda. He made me so angry when I was a kid reading that book. How dare he call his daughter stupid when she was brilliant and magical? Fuck him. He's a stupid one. Punch him right in his stupid, illiterate face.
Yeah. Roald Dahl can really make you hate an adult character. What?
Is that the one played by Danny DeVito in the movie?
I don't remember. I don't remember the movie very well. But there's a lot of bad dads in Roald Dahl, actually. It's a good one. I like that.
Matt, there's a lot of bad dads in everything.
Yeah.
The secret of this question was that actually literally every human being on this planet has some sort of daddy issue.
In fact,
because they love writing characters about it.
Name a good dad.
Yeah.
It's harder.
That's what we should have done. What's a good dad in fiction?
Name a good dad in fiction. I'm
sure there's some.
I'm sure there's one.
Any minute now, it's going to come to me.
I'm sure there's one good dad.
So moving on.
Pear Jane says Moreland Holmes, and specifically Elementary's Moreland Holmes, I don't know the reference, is my current favorite bad dad. He's an evil business genius whose brilliant son sees through him and yet still depends on him. His arc on the show is fantastic. And if that's not enough to get you hooked, he is played by the apotheosis of bad dad actors, John Noble. Elegant, urbane, and cunning, Moreland's character is the polar opposite of Denethor in all things, so long as you don't count their exceptionally crappy parenting. Throw in Fringe's alternate reality Dr. Bishop, and you have a great start for a bad dad wall of shame.
Elementary, Matt, is a modern Sherlock Holmes story. It takes place in modern day.
Is that the one starring Benedict Cumberbatch?
No, that's a different one that takes place in modern day, except for that one season when it didn't, because that's real weird. This is one produced in the US. Lucy Liu, I believe, is Watson in this.
Ah, cool. Neat. I don't know anything about this.
I think it's done. It went on for a long time. I never watched it, but Yeah, look, 7
Wow.
seasons. Wow.
Yet another 7-season show I've never heard of. There's just so much fucking TV now.
Uh-huh. Complicated 9519 says, good thing anime has a plethora of shitty ass dads to pick from, but my answer is the worst of them all. The winner of the #1 worst dad in the history of worst dad mug goes to Shu Tucker from Full Metal Alchemist. I won't dive deep into it, but this man loves his work more than anything. His wife mysteriously disappeared, leaving him to take care of his daughter and her pet dog alone. A practical is coming up to see if he can keep his grants and all that jazz. He's famous for making a talking chimera. Is that chimera?
Chimera, I guess. I don't know.
Well, this bastard turns his child and dog into another one. He fused the body of his daughter with the body of a dog. It is so heart-wrenching. They are in pain and suffering, but as they see the main character, they ask him to play with them in chimera form. As the father stands there proud of his work. I hate him, we all hate him, and you should hate him too. I do. You know, I hate this guy. And I hate him so much that I'm just never going to watch the show because why would I do that to myself? I hate this guy.
Yeah. I hope that they use alchemy on him and he dies.
They use full alchemy, metal alchemy.
Full metal alchemy. I refuse to ever learn what that means.
I have no idea. Yeah. I'm assuming, I mean, alchemy is transforming things into other things, right? So I'm assuming they're turning poop into metal. Full metal. Yes. I think full metal is probably like a made up anime term for like really good metal. I
always just figured that it was just the thing that anime does where they'll reference pop culture in a way that doesn't quite make sense. So it's actually a reference to Full Metal Jacket.
That's definitely what it is.
But not in a way where the reference makes any sense. It's just because it sounds cool. All right. I don't tell me if I'm wrong. Okay.
Yeah, please.
I don't want to know. That's what I'm going to continue believing. Okay. All right. Messy glitter hobbit, something like that. Welcome, messy.
Just read the words. Just read them.
I always think of Lord Asriel from the His Dark Materials series. He gave enough of a fuck about Lyra to keep her out of the grasp of the Magisterium, but then more or less forgets about her and even poses as her uncle for the majority of her childhood. It could be argued that this is to protect her from his enemies within the Magisterium, but it also keeps her out of his way while he pursues his own ambitions. While it is true that Mrs. Coulter, Lyra's mother, is an absolute monster, she does come to love Lyra in her own way towards the end of the series, and Asriel at one point openly mocks her for her maternal feelings. Asriel's regard for Lyra extends more or less to his ambition to destroy the authority once he realizes her destiny, and in fact he is not only incredulous that this should ultimately fall to her, but refuses to acknowledge her unique resourcefulness and resolve. The sacrifice he makes with Mrs. Coulter in the end, while ultimately protecting his daughter, is still to meet that end goal rather than serving any paternal feelings on his part.
Yeah, that guy sucks.
Yeah, I've only read the first book, but he definitely sucks so bad within the first book that I feel comfortable giving him.
I've read all three. He sucks.
Good.
Loonwise says, I was going to answer Jack Torrance, but much of his badness was affected externally by the entities of the Overlook and the monkey on his back. My #1 bad dad has to be Nikos Vassal, aka Heartbreaker from Worm/Ward. We only get to see him in short glimpses, but we're still able to see the many layers of atrocious horror he heaped on his kids and concubines through the many, many pages and characters. The Heartbroken, his kid's parahuman team name, was deliciously fitting. We say thank you, Big Imp, for killing him. Fuck that guy.
Yeah.
Fuck that guy.
That's a good answer, man. There's some really fucked up shit in the Worm Ward books. If you guys are into that kind of.
Yeah, lots of bad dads in that thing.
Lots of.
Once again, can't think of a good dad. Wait. There's one good dad in that. I'm thinking. I don't want to spoil things.
There is one good dad.
I can think of one good dad.
You found it. I know. I know the one character you're talking about. We did it. We can't say, but we did it. And what's funny is that we absolutely are talking about the same guy.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
No, Heartbreaker is great though. I mean, he's horrible.
Do you think, we've talked about how bad dads are like everywhere. Do you think bad dad stories are more numerous than bad mom stories?
I bet it's close, but maybe it's just recency bias because we're seeing this huge list of bad dad characters. But I'm inclined to say yes, but I also think it's probably pretty close.
Yeah, I mean, I think bad dad and bad mom stories are definitely different from each other, right? I think I forget who said it, but like absenteeism is a very common theme of bad dadism, right? Whereas I don't think absenteeism is in as many bad mom stories. I think it's actually oppressive controlism more often.
I think you're right. I think that feels right to me.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Just Stand 8460 says William H. Macy's masterful performance as Frank Gallagher in the television show Shameless. And then they come back later and edit their answer to say, fuck that answer. And then they say Rick Sanchez from Rick and Morty. He was an absentee for most of his daughter's upbringing, never affirming her enough. He constantly undermines her by endangering his grandkids, and he treats Jerry, his son-in-law, like trash. I mean, it's all hilarious, and he's fucking awesome because of these things, and he's a kick-ass grandpa. But yeah,
no, he can't be a bad dad because remember he turned into that pickle that one time.
Yeah, he turned into a pickle and it was funny.
Yeah,
it was great.
It was funny that he was a pickle.
It was really funny, and it made up for the neglect and selfishness.
I mean, he literally turned himself into a pickle to avoid going to therapy to become a better father. So
exactly.
But he is funny because he's a pickle.
Yeah.
Also, I love the Shameless reference or answer here. That is a show I never saw the last few seasons, but that is one of those shows. Matt, this show ran on Showtime for like a decade or longer. It's like they just kept making it, and it's one of those shows that I don't think was ever like stupendous. Like it was never great, but it was like consistently good for like 10 years, which is so rare in television. Like it was just good, solid, you know what you're going to get, funny TV. And William H. Macy's character sucks. He's also wonderful. He's hilarious, but he's a horrible, horrible father.
Fantastic.
Walking Dude 22 says, I am putting the following limitations on my answers. Number 1, fictional dads. Number 2, not Stephen King creations. Number 3, actively involved in the story and not just an influencer on key characters. I've got to give props to my man, Al Bundy. Al is a terrible person because he hates his life. He hates his life because he sort of got trapped into it. It's not textually stated in the show, but you sort of know that Al and Peggy got married because they were hooking up and got pregnant with Kelly. At his core, he's a decent enough guy. He honors his commitments to his family and his job. He always chooses self-sacrifice to take care of his family. Yes, he's a prime example of toxic masculinity. His attitudes toward his women and his children are just ridiculous, but he's honest, and that's why it works. Al Bundy, always there with the glory days of football story and sage advice for his kids, like stretch before you ovulate. Al demonstrates his parenting chops for 11 seasons and 259 episodes. Definitely not the ideal father for sitcoms of earlier eras. This is a great point. And I don't think Walking Dude ever said the name of the sitcom. So for those of you who don't know, he's talking about Married with Children, which was the sitcom we weren't allowed to watch for whatever reason. My parents thought that was the bad one, and whenever they saw it on, would change the channel. They did not like us watching that because it was crude.
It was crass, and
they talked about sex.
They'd say the word sex occasionally.
Yeah,
I never watched it either, but I don't think it was even necessarily that we weren't allowed to. I think it was just clearly like it was kind of a more like mean-spirited humor.
Yeah, it definitely was.
Especially since like we were more of a Simpsons family. But
this does bring up a good point though, because I think there is a thing in sitcom fathers that is particularly terrible, right? Especially 90s sitcom, like it's I'm not going to call it specifically toxic masculinity, but it's more like gender normative dads don't know how to take care of children, and we're going to mine that for jokes constantly.
Yeah.
Like the dumb, barely aware of what's going on around the house dad thing was something that sitcoms just mined forever.
Yeah, right. Like that's what people said about Homer is like basically he's a lazy idiot. It's not that he's a bad father. It's more that he's just like a barely cognizant human being in any way, shape, or form, and he happens to have kids.
Yeah. Dumb husbands in sitcoms was like the thing forever. I mean, think of a 90s sitcom about a family. Like Everybody Loves Raymond. He was dumb husband.
Yeah.
Home Improvement, dumb husband.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the trope. And then, and then even the subsequent generations, like Family Guy and so forth, that's basically just continuing riffs on the same idea.
Yeah.
American Dad and not that I've actually watched that, but yeah, we love to say that dads are dumb.
Yeah, we do. We do really love to say it. Dads are either dumb or terrible or both.
Yep.
No good dads. No, there's no good dads. I will say, I thought of some more good dads while we were thinking.
Okay.
Because the father from Boy Meets World is a pretty good dad. He's a pretty good dad.
Okay, I never watched that, so.
I probably said this already, but my wife and I rewatched that entire show during quarantine in 2020, and it's delightful. It's such a good little show.
Okay. I don't. As far as I know, there's only one character whose name starts with a D from Parahumans.
I already knew which character you were talking about. You didn't have to put that in as well.
I just wanted to make sure everybody else knew.
Okay. All right. That is it for our answers to this week's question. Thank you so much for everyone that sent those in. All right. Next week, Matt, another question. The final question of our time with the Talisman. And what is next week's discussion question?
Who's your favorite Christ figure in fiction?
Yeah, and we thought this was rather fitting here near the end of the book. There's a lot of them, folks. There's a lot of them. Go crazy with it. I'm sure there's a bunch of anime ones too. No, but I just want to give credit to our listener Sigma for kind of leading us towards this direction. They mentioned this idea earlier, and I was like, that's actually a good idea for a question. So we thought this would be a fitting way to cap off our discussion questions of the Talisman by talking about favorite Jesuses.
Yes. Bring us your Jesuses.
All right, folks, that is it for us this week. Next week on Kingslingers, as we said, we will finish the book. We are going to finish Talisman. It's chapters 45 through whatever the end of the book is, I forget. But just if you're reading along with us, just don't stop until the book is over. There you go.
Yeah. Remember, you can reach us via email at kingslingerspod@gmail.com or on Twitter at kingslingerspod, and the subreddit at r/doofmedia is a great place to answer the discussion question as well.
Absolutely. And if you are not already subscribed to Kingslingers, we are like 100 and something episodes in. So now is the time to do it. Actually, like a year ago was the time to do it, but now is especially the time to do it. You can find this everywhere that there are podcasts, you can find us.
Yeah. If you like any of our shows and you want to support us, then please consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia. Speaking of Patreon, special thanks to new patrons, Jeanette A, David W, Dan V, and Brandy C. Welcome. We hope you enjoy the cool stuff we have over there on the Patreon. We hope you're able to enjoy the other levels of the Tower podcast episodes, which we mentioned earlier. We always have fun with those, and I think that they are a good listen, personally.
Yeah, I agree. I think all these are people at the $10 donor level, so they should have plenty of other levels of the Tower to listen to.
Sweet.
But of course, we know that not everyone out there can afford to donate, and that is absolutely okay. There are still tons of ways to help us out. Just by listening, frankly, you're helping us out. By sharing us, by spreading the good word about the work we are doing here would be absolutely wonderful. And of course, you can always help us by leaving a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. This week's Spotlight review comes from Bowfinger1542, who gives us 5 stars and says, "My favorite podcast. This is not the only Stephen King podcast I listen to, but it is my favorite, and my favorite overall. Thursday mornings, I have a routine of listening to this podcast, then listening to next week's chapters on Audible. I love these guys." Well, we love you too, Bowfinger. Thank you so much. That's an honor. I mean, it's one thing to say something's your favorite podcast when it's the only one you listen to, which we still love those comments. But if you're also listening to other podcasts and we're still your favorite, wow.
Thank you. Yeah, that is a very nice thing to say. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Bowfinger.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who continues to leave those ratings and reviews. We really do appreciate it. And that's going to do it for us this week. We are finishing the book next week, Matt. Can you believe it? Can you believe in just a week's time you will be done with the 6th book of season 2?
I can't.
Only 2 more. Wow.
Yeah.
All right, folks. We'll see you back here next week for the end of the book. Long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.